Today I want to talk about what I would do if I were over the Department of Education. Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lena Saleh, the Edtech Guru, where we explore all things Edtech and education related. All right, let's do this. With every administration change, there always comes in a new Secretary of Education. What would I do if I were the Secretary of Education? If this year has brought anything under a microscope, that is the world of education. We have seen that schools have been underprepared, no fault to the schools, but our educational system overall is lacking several important details. Under Betsy DeVos, she was focused on giving more choice to parents and focusing more on the privatization of education. When we think about what she has done over the past 4 years, most teachers will tell you that it hasn't been anything with what we have wanted it to be. Am I saying that she did the worst job that there ever was? No. Some things that really were brought into the forefront is the focus on privatization of education. Why might that be the case? I think we have to focus, as much as I support public education, and I wholeheartedly do, have to focus about why would the government want to focus on privatization of education rather than focusing on public education. That's the first thing that we really need to discuss. With more privatization of schools, the less jurisdiction that the governmental system has over us. If we could see anything from how COVID-19 has played out from each state to state and from each county to county, it really matters who is in your local government and what your local government supports. This can either be to the detriment or can lead itself very well to the educational structure that's in place within that state or within that jurisdiction. I personally wish that the government would either make a choice, either put your hands all in the pot or take your hands out of the pot. So I can understand why the focus on privatization has been an issue. However, that doesn't deal with our funding and our taxes and everything else that the government kind of has their hands in. So what would I do if I were the new Secretary of Education? The first thing that I would do is completely revamp all of education. And I know that this is going to take me 4 years to do. In the first year within the system, I would just continue on as normal. But while this first year is continuing on as a regular regulation, I would want to bring a team of individuals from all walks of the educational environment, from private schools to public schools to thought leaders, and anyone that I can basically have in the room. I know that President Obama did this when he was talking about his STEM initiative and the computer science initiative that has been brought forth there for CS for All that came from President Barack Obama. So bringing all of these thought leaders into one room is going to be very important. We need to explore the highs and lows from every system throughout all of America. In a certain school district in general, let's just talk about Austin, where I currently live. There's Austin ISD, there's Manor ISD, there's Eanes ISD, Lake Travis ISD, Round Rock, Hayes. There's a multitude of different school districts within just the general county of Austin. Why is this an important thing to bring all of these leaders to the table? Well, every single one presents something different. In Lake Travis ISD, generally, it's more of a more economically advantaged population, and in Manor ISD, it's more of a disadvantaged population. So we need to bring all of these thought leaders to the table. Then I want to talk to the government agencies within each state, because if I move from Texas to Colorado, the education that I receive is much different, even if I move from school district to school district. And we need these leaders to come to the table and think about things. One school district that I was in particularly, Leander ISD here in Texas, something that was really unique about the district was that if one school received new devices, then every single school had to receive the same thing. So no matter where you were on the spectrum of the schools, so maybe you're in the disadvantaged area, maybe you're in the economically advantaged area, everyone was getting the same type of funding from the district itself. Where the additional funding and devices come from is from your community and from your parents and from your stakeholders. So that's just something to kind of keep tucked away back in the corner of your mind. So I would bring all of these thought leaders to the table, and some discussions that need to be brought to the table are what we are doing right now, is it working? No. Okay, we also see there's a record rate of teacher burnout, record rate of students leaving to go to the private sector or the charter spectrum. So we're seeing this transition of how schools are working. And why is that the case? Well, our school systems overall have not changed so much in the last 20 or so years. Our data points are decreasing. The risk of standardized testing is so intense. So what can we do? Well, we know that STEM works. We know that computer science works for the way that students are being taught. And we also know that project-based and problem-based learning are really essential to the growth of students' skill set. Not only are they important to the growth of students' skill set, but they are important in preparing them for the roles of our future. During COVID-19, it has done anything but project technology into the spot. We know that students need to be tech savvy. We know that they need to know how to navigate even multiple tabs within one platform. They need to know how to go from their Zoom to their Meet, either one of those platforms that you're utilizing or your Teams, and go to different tabs by themselves on their own. Not only that, but they're having to do several tasks at once. Whereas in the classroom, you have more of a controlled task structure. This is more relevant to what we do in the real world. There is no one person's job, typically, in which you just do the same thing every day, day in and day out. Even in grocery departments, you may move throughout the groceries. You may not only just be a cashier, you may stock. There's different things that you're doing throughout your day-to-day life that are going to bring challenges. And so it's important for students to know how to bring on those challenges. We know that they're not really prepared for what the real world has to offer. We also know that there's been a steady decline in students enrolling in college, not only the 2-year, but the 4-year college universities. Obviously, COVID-19 has anything but projected those rates on the downward slope, but it's just changing. We have to change and adapt with what the world is bringing to us, and if not, we're going to continue to be behind in our educational structure. In different places, we can't even compare ourselves to China, because in China, instead of students doing after-school sports, or any of these Asian countries, instead of them doing after-school sports and focusing on different types of physical activity, instead the parents, you have one child, typically 1 to 2 children, and you are living with your parental units, you're living with your grandparents, and everyone is contributing to the financial success of the student. And so they're going every single day. They have extended school days. Not only that, but they are doing more enrichment type activities, more coding, that type of an environment. I know specifically for CodeMonkey and any of those coding platforms, it's also nationally recognized. Not only that, but it is very important for students to focus on after school learning. I remember even in high school, we had foreign exchange students who came over and they're like, wow, your school system is just so much easier. We just have a much easier, more social life. Americans are just much more social, as well as in the Western world where you're just more social. It's more important. Not only do we need to think about bringing in that project-based computer science type of thinking with the computational thinking and how to problem solve, it also lends itself to when students leave the K-12 educational system, they don't know how to work with their peers. It's changing. It's been more interactive. The biggest part is how to deal with failure. So that's something important. We all can learn a skill set, and that's just important. We know that tech companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars every single year teaching their computer programmers soft skills. So we know that soft skills are very, very important skill set that students need to have. But we also know that we need to rethink that entirely. So I bring my team of individuals together. We revamp how we're going to think about doing this process. This is not going to be a 30-day turnaround. This is going to be an entire year of researching and compiling data, and it's going to be important to bring different organizations in who have already been collecting this data to bring it to the table so we can have well-informed, data-driven decisions, and then also do a little bit of research to see what schools are doing, like in Finland or in Sweden or even in China or any of these other countries, to see why they're producing top-level individuals, in which we're bringing those types of individuals to our country to fulfill our roles. So what can we do to get teachers and students thinking on a different way? We know that robots and robotic systems are going to be taking the places of these regular roles and jobs, and COVID has done anything but shown that that's going to be a continued case. Stores, retail organizations are changing as we speak. They're having to adapt to curbside, inside. So what kinds of roles are you going to need? Do we need robotic individuals? No, we can have the robots fill those roles. They're much more efficient typically, and have humans think. That's the difference. We think about things and have a very diverse way of thinking, and so it's just important to have that. Then we need to rethink the school sites and school funding. I think there should be a blanket funding across every single state. I know that this is a very, 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 very controversial subject, but I think that every single school should receive the same funding just as a blanket. Every school, no matter where you are, blanketed. If you receive fundraising, that fundraising should go into an allocation in which it can support the students and staff on site to be able to purchase items that are needed for that success. Then you come up with some mandatory things that students do need to know for that future ready preparation. So what is it that they need to do? Do you need to know how to do a high stakes test? No. Do you need to know how to think under pressure? Absolutely. The thing about high stakes testing is it's taking that background knowledge that you have and putting it under pressure. If you leave the classroom and you decide you don't want to teach any longer, you will go into interviews, and the interviews are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 with very high level projects that you're having to do, case studies. Sometimes you're writing curriculum and then you're meeting with a team. You have to think critically on the spot. And so it's important to give those skills for our students. So we need to rethink funding, bring everybody in to have data-informed decisions, and then really be thinking about what these schools are doing really well. I've talked about Wisman Public School District. There's some school districts in Philadelphia that are doing some really great things. And there are pockets of school districts across the country really making differences right now. And everyone else is just doing what they can to survive. We know that. But I'm talking about in this pre-pandemic to this post-endemic world that we're living in, the transitions that are happening. We know that I'm just going to remove COVID off the table. We know what needs to happen. It's just only highlighted things in our system that's been broken. So we know that part. So redo the funding, talk about the funding, and then we need to talk about some sort of standards that are going to be important. If people can focus on national CSTA standards, ISTE standards, if these standards can be blanketed, why are we making so many different changes in every single state to be able to ensure that? Common Core may not be your be-all, end-all, and I know many states are going away from that, but what was really nice about Common Core is that it was giving a set of nationally derived standards from every single state. Every single state wants to make a change. They make 1 or 2 modifications to the languages. Doesn't every kid need to know how to learn the same thing? We all need to learn how to read. We all need to know how to write. We all need to know specific science standards instead of putting everyone at a disadvantage. Like, you come from this area in the Valley in California, you're learning this, and we know that those students that come out are always stronger. Or you're coming out from a disadvantaged area in rural Kansas. I don't think anyone should be set up for that different type of success. Now, where you're importing your enrichment, maybe you're doing a project in rural Kansas about how to help the farmers be more efficient and how to make profit margins. What are we going to do for this more future-ready world? What can we do to prepare ourselves for that future? Whereas in the Valley, they're going to be having very different conversations. Maybe it's about fires. Maybe it's about devastation that's happening there. Maybe it's about how people are leaving in droves from the community. So you're taking your local resources and you're tying them in, but the practices of what you need to come out knowing don't change. So this is going to take quite a while for this to get in place and bringing those top leaders into the table. And then we have to start looking at our school sites. Does it make sense to have a 5-day work week? Can we bring in different thought leaders to rethink how every single school site is working? We know that overall, every single person that you meet is different. So every single way that a person learns is different as well. So what are some blanketed things that are going to be really important? And how can we make that teacher now be the thought leader and being able to really help students achieve at that high level? The thing about the way that our world is today is that nobody is ever going to be smarter than the internet. At any given time, even the smartest person in the room is looking on the internet to find information. And in the old days, we would go to the library to find that information, but right now I can find it in less than 2 seconds. An wealth of information and resources, so it's knowing how to vet those resources. Putting the teacher back into a role of facilitation is going to be important. Students still thrive that one-on-one relationship. You can never replace the role of a teacher. That's why parents are so important in our lives. Teachers are so important in our lives. Bosses and anyone who's leading and guiding you is important. If a boss just sat with me all day and talked at me, told me what I needed to do, and never let me do what I wanted to do and show what I'm capable of doing, I'm never going to thrive to my fullest potential. So it's going to be important to also give this skills to the teachers. And we really need to focus on training for teachers. The first week back to school really doesn't need to be just bull. really. It's just a bunch of bull that when you go back to the beginning of the school year, I've had just a few really well done professional developments that I have loved. You know what I've loved more? Conferences. Do you know why I've loved conferences more and why probably most teachers have loved it? Is because it's choice-based. It's based upon my needs. That's why I love what they're doing at LA Unified School District with their professional development. Now you can have teams of teachers come together and prepare that. I think that you need to have more of a departmentalization with your 4th grade teachers, your 5th grade teachers, your 6th grade teachers, your 7th grade teachers, your 8th grade teachers, and everyone who's teaching within those content areas becoming really content leaders and know the content. Asking an elementary teacher to do reading, math, science, social studies, every single subject area, there's gonna be holes in what you know. I would always tell my students, I don't know, let's figure this out together. So instead of having that, let's have these teachers be really proficient in a subject area. At a business, we have departments in businesses. We have a marketing department, we have a finance department, we have an HR department, you have your dev department, your web development department, you have all kinds of departments. So people get good at a skill set. It's important to have that skill set as well. And we want our teachers to thrive in that way too and to feel important. This is probably going to be one of the most controversial points is you mix up the way that your school day works in having not necessarily a 5-day school and you restructure how it's done. Why is school only 9 months? I understand that we need breaks, so I think having built-in breaks throughout the year, but either you continue to have the school set up the way that it is and giving students the break. I think shortening the summer break is going to be really important. And then I think that if you're going to give teachers the summer, you give them a few weeks off of break because we know that they can't just take off school and prepare sub-plans for their students, that kind of a thing. But what should be done over the summer, what they're already doing anyway, is professional development training. That is the time in which you really need to give your teachers a really good starting point for the year. Having them be off for almost the entire summer, coming back to the school, giving them 1 day to prep on their own, and then teaching, expecting them to teach at a very high level all of this content is very unrealistic. Why teachers stay so sedimentary in one job is because they, never mastering classroom development, classroom management. Everything changes with each group of kiddos that come in, and it's getting increasingly harder how our world is changing. Why they stay there is because you know the curriculum and you feel confident in what it is that you're teaching. You can't feel confident with 1 day of work. We need to take the departmentalization and really mix up how it is that we're teaching. And with that comes an increase of teachers' pay. So now you can pay them like we pay in industry. So anytime that we're going to keep something governmentalized the way that we do it, and why they focus to privatization is that it will always be stuck at a certain level. You're only going to get so much funding from the state. You're only going to get so much of this. And anytime the government has their hands in it, there's restrictions on how much you can actually increase the teacher's pay. So I think there's some ways that you can also mix up the funding allocation, and that's also something to consider by talking to high-level companies and not just talking to the school sites themselves. Is it necessary to have 17 teachers, or can 17 teachers teach more so like at the college level where they're teaching multiple classes, focusing on that because now their roles kind of switch. So we need to talk about alleviating the amount of work that teachers have, but increasing their pay, but also giving them a specialization so that at any time they don't feel so stifled. It's not what we need to do, and we really need to focus on that. And I'm not saying taking the fun away and taking the creativity away, but there are some important things that we do need to do to alleviate the stress from each teacher's shoulders. And that's just something that has to be done. Restructuring that, reallocating funding, coming together with industry leaders and making really data-informed decisions. And with that, also just having open lines of communication. And I'm not saying that you're being as open as maybe Donald Trump has been with some of his concerns and things like that. But I think it is important to bring the community into things that you're doing or things that you're working on. I think that's the most beautiful thing about the technology and the world that we live in, is being more transparent with your stakeholders about what it is that you're, expecting and experiencing. And I think bringing an important feature is bringing the parents back into the table and letting them have a voice as well. Right now, the way that it's set up is parents don't get a voice, but who's the ultimate buyer of education? Our parents. They want their students to be the most educated that they can, even in an economically advantaged or disadvantaged and everything in between. It's important that our students are thriving. That's what they want. You don't want your 40-year-old kid living with you because they don't have the skill set to thrive, and yet they spent half their life in education trying to get these skill sets. So I think it's going to be really important to have these conversations at the higher level and rethink the way that it is. I don't think you just need one person in the room. You're going to have lots of conversations, and lots of research is going to be done. It's going to take take about 4 years for this to really turn itself around. Hopefully you can project it further, but breaking it apart and putting it back together is going to be the most essential way for our students, for our teachers, for our community, and at the end of the day, for our country to thrive at a high level. Remember, as always, we're in this together. Please comment below, share your thoughts, feelings, or reach out to me on any of my social medias, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Once again, I want to thank you so much for following along on this journey. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment below. And until next time, bye.